What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a late-night stage expecting a normal conversation, but instead faces a host who seems determined to embarrass him in front of millions? In just 36 seconds of one particular exchange, everything would spiral completely out of control, ending with Joaquin Phoenix doing something no guest had ever done before on that show. But before we get into how it all fell apart, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me your thoughts on what went down that night. The studio audience was buzzing with excitement as Joaquin Phoenix walked out onto the stage. The applause was thunderous. People were standing, cheering, genuinely thrilled to see him. Phoenix had just come off the back of a massive film release, one that critics were calling the performance of his career. This was supposed to be a celebration, a victory lap, a chance for him to connect with fans and talk about his craft. The energy in the room felt electric, positive, full of anticipation. Stephen Colbert stood up from behind his desk, that signature smile plastered across his face. He extended his hand and Phoenix shook it, both men exchanging pleasantries as the crowd continued to roar. They settled into their seats, Phoenix on the guest couch, Colbert leaning back in his chair with that casual confidence that comes from doing this thousands of times. The band finished their musical flourish, and the audience finally quieted down, ready for what they assumed would be another entertaining interview. Colbert started off simple enough. "Welcome, welcome. So good to have you here," he said, his voice dripping with that practiced late-night host enthusiasm. Phoenix nodded, offering a genuine smile, clearly ready to engage. "Thanks for having me. It's great to be here," Phoenix replied, his tone warm but measured as always. The audience clapped again, smaller this time, just showing their appreciation. "Now," Colbert continued, leaning forward slightly, "your new film is absolutely incredible. I saw it last week, and I have to say, I was blown away." Phoenix's face lit up a bit at the compliment. You could see he appreciated the recognition. "Thank you. That means a lot," he said quietly. "The work we put into it was really intense, really personal." Colbert nodded along, but there was something in his expression that shifted, something subtle. Right, intense," he repeated, drawing out the word just a bit longer than necessary. There was a pause, just brief enough to feel slightly uncomfortable, before Colbert jumped back in. "So tell me, how do you prepare for a role like this? I mean, do you do the whole method thing? Lock yourself in a room? Stop talking to people? What's the process?" Phoenix began to answer, his voice thoughtful and deliberate. "Well, I wouldn't call it method exactly, but I do try to immerse myself in the character's world. I spend time thinking about their motivations, their pain, what drives them. It's about finding truth in the performance, making it real even when the circumstances are extreme." Colbert was nodding, but his eyes had this glint to them now, something mischievous maybe, or maybe something less playful. "So you're telling me," he interrupted, "that you basically just sit around thinking about sad things for months?" Phoenix's smile faltered just slightly. He let out a small laugh, the kind you do when you're not sure if someone is joking or not. "I mean, it's more complicated than that, but yeah. There's definitely an emotional component to it." The host leaned back in his chair, spreading his arms wide in this exaggerated gesture. "Must be exhausting," he said, his tone dripping with mock sympathy. "All that brooding, all that seriousness. Do you ever just, I don't know, lighten up?" The audience laughed, but it was an uncertain laugh, the kind where people aren't quite sure if they should be laughing or not. Phoenix shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening just a fraction. "I think the work speaks for itself," he said carefully. "If the performance connects with people, then the process was worth it." His answer was diplomatic, professional, but you could hear the edge creeping into his voice, just barely. Colbert wasn't letting it go though. "Oh, the work definitely speaks," he said, air quoting the word speaks with his fingers. "But come on, Joaquin, don't you think sometimes actors take themselves a little too seriously? Like it's a movie, not brain surgery. You're playing pretend for a living." Phoenix's expression hardened. The shift was visible now, no longer subtle. He sat up straighter, his shoulders squaring. "I think what we do matters," he said firmly. "Stories matter. The way we tell them, the honesty we bring to them, it affects people. It's not just playing pretend." The host raised his eyebrows in this theatrical way, as if Phoenix had just said something absurd. "Wow, okay," he said, chuckling to himself. "I didn't realize we were getting so philosophical tonight." The audience laughed again, louder this time, but Phoenix wasn't laughing. He was staring at Colbert with this intense focus, the kind of look that should have been a warning sign. "Look," Colbert continued, "I get it. You're passionate about your craft and all that. But let's be real for a second. You get paid millions of dollars to wear costumes and read lines, someone else wrote. Meanwhile, there are teachers out there making $30,000 a year shaping young minds, nurses saving lives for barely more than minimum wage. But sure, let's talk about how hard it is to access your emotions for a film role. The room went quiet. Not silent exactly, but there was this collective intake of breath from the audience, this sudden tension that hadn't been there before. Phoenix was staring at Colbert now, really staring, and his face had gone from merely serious to something closer to disbelief. "Are you seriously trying to diminish what I do right now?" Phoenix asked, his voice low but clear. "On your show? After inviting me here?" Colbert threw his hands up in this dismissive gesture. "I'm not diminishing anything. I'm just providing some perspective. You actors get so sensitive when anyone points out that maybe, just maybe, your job isn't as important as you think it is." Phoenix shook his head slowly, his lips pressed into a thin line. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said quietly. "You sit behind that desk every night making jokes, taking easy shots at people, and you think that gives you the right to lecture me about importance? Oh, here we go," Colbert said, rolling his eyes dramatically. "The tortured artist routine. Do you practice this in the mirror?" Phoenix stood up abruptly, the sudden movement causing a gasp from the audience. He wasn't yelling, wasn't making a scene, but his body language said everything. "I came here to have a conversation," he said, his voice steady but filled with restrained anger. "Not to be mocked by someone who clearly has no respect for what I do or why I do it." Colbert was still seated, but his smile had faded into something more defensive. "Come on, sit down. Don't be so dramatic. It's just a joke. We're having fun here." Phoenix didn't sit. Instead, he looked directly into the camera, then back at Colbert. "This isn't fun," he said simply. "This is you trying to make yourself feel bigger by making me feel smaller, and I'm not interested in participating." The host's expression shifted then, from defensive to something almost aggressive. "Well, if you can't handle a little bit of teasing, maybe you shouldn't be doing press," he shot back. "This is what talk shows are. We joke around, we have fun, we don't take everything so seriously. You want everyone to treat you like some kind of artist god, but you can't handle one tiny bit of pushback." Phoenix took a breath, and you could see him trying to maintain his composure. "It's not about handling pushback," he said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "It's about basic respect. You invited me here as your guest. That means something, or at least it should. But instead of having a real conversation, you're performing for your audience at my expense." Colbert stood up now too, coming around the desk. His demeanor had changed completely. The friendly host persona completely dropped. "You know what your problem is?" he said, pointing at Phoenix. "You think you're above all this. You think you're too good for late-night television, too important to just relax and have a laugh. But let me tell you something, buddy. You need shows like this way more than we need you." The audience was completely silent now, everyone sensing that something had gone terribly wrong. Phoenix stared at Colbert for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but absolutely clear. "I don't need this," he said, "and I'm not going to stand here and let you disrespect me for entertainment." He turned then, not dramatically, not in a huff, just a simple turn toward the side of the stage. "Wait, where are you going?" Colbert called after him, his voice now carrying a hint of panic, like he was realizing this was actually happening. Phoenix paused, looked back over his shoulder. "I'm leaving," he said matter-of-factly. "This interview is over. You can finish your show without me." Colbert's face went through about 5 different expressions in the span of 2 seconds. Confusion, anger, disbelief, then this forced smile that didn't reach his eyes at all. "Come on, don't be ridiculous," he said, gesturing back toward the couch. "We're just getting started here. Sit back down. Let's talk about the movie like you came here to do." But Phoenix was already 3 steps toward the exit, his jaw set, his decision clearly made. The producers were scrambling now. You could see crew members on the side of the stage making frantic gestures, trying to figure out what to do. This wasn't supposed to happen. Guests don't just leave in the middle of interviews. It breaks every unwritten rule of how these shows work. The audience sat frozen, unsure if this was part of some elaborate bit or if they were witnessing an actual meltdown in real time. "Joaquin? Seriously," Colbert called out, his voice getting louder, more insistent. "You're really going to walk out over a couple of jokes? That's what you're doing right now?" Phoenix stopped walking, but didn't turn around completely, just angled his body slightly so Colbert could see his profile. "They weren't jokes," Phoenix said calmly. "They were insults, dressed up as jokes. There's a difference." Colbert laughed then, but it was harsh, bitter. "Oh, please," he said, throwing his hands up. Everyone who comes on this show gets teased. That's the format. That's what we do. You think you're special? You think you deserve different treatment than every other guest who sits on that couch? Phoenix finally turned around fully, his eyes locked on Colbert with laser focus. I don't think I'm special, he said, his voice rising just slightly. I think I deserve basic human decency. Something you clearly forgot how to give the moment the cameras turned on. The host stepped closer, closing the distance between them. His body language was aggressive now, all pretense of the friendly entertainer completely gone. You want to talk about decency? He shot back. How about the decency of showing up to promote your movie and actually doing your job? How about the decency of not making my show look bad because your ego got bruised? Phoenix's eyes narrowed. My ego? He repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. You spent the last 10 minutes trying to belittle everything I do, everything I care about, and I'm the one with the ego problem? Colbert crossed his arms over his chest, his expression stubborn. I was trying to have a conversation, trying to challenge you a little bit, get past the usual boring press tour answers, but apparently you're too fragile to handle anything that isn't pure adoration. The audience was shifting uncomfortably in their seats now, some people looking at each other with wide eyes, others staring down at their phones like they couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Phoenix took a step forward, his voice gaining strength. You want to know why your questions weren't getting interesting answers? Because they weren't real questions. They were setups for your punchlines. You weren't interested in what I had to say. You were interested in making yourself look clever at my expense. That's not conversation. That's a performance. And I'm not your prop. The host's face flushed red. A prop? He repeated incredulously. You're calling yourself a prop? You came on my show to sell your movie. That's the deal. That's how this works. I give you a platform. You entertain my audience. Everyone wins. But no, you had to make it difficult. Had to act like you're above it all. Phoenix shook his head slowly, deliberately. I never said I was above anything, he replied. I said I expect respect. And the fact that you think that's the same thing says everything about you. Colbert's producer was now at the edge of the stage, whispering urgently to someone with a headset, probably trying to figure out if they should cut to commercial, end the show, do something, anything to stop this train wreck. But both men were completely locked in now, neither one backing down. The tension so thick you could practically feel it through the screen. You know what? Colbert said, his voice dripping with contempt. Maybe I misjudged you. I thought you were a serious actor, someone worth having on. But now I see you're just another Hollywood prima donna who can't handle the slightest bit of criticism. You talk about your craft like it's some sacred thing, but the second someone questions it, you fall apart. Phoenix's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but his voice remained controlled. You didn't question my craft, he said slowly. You mocked it. You compared what I do to playing pretend. You diminished it, reduced it, made it seem worthless, and then you acted shocked when I didn't sit there and smile through it. So what? Colbert countered, his voice getting louder. So what if I think actors take themselves too seriously? I'm allowed to have that opinion. This is my show, my stage, my rules. And if you don't like it, there's the door. He pointed dramatically toward the exit, his arm fully extended, his face twisted in anger. Phoenix looked at the pointed finger, then back at Colbert's face. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a warm smile, not a friendly smile, but a cold, knowing smile that seemed to cut through all of Colbert's bluster. You're right, Phoenix said quietly. It is your show, your stage, your rules. And that's exactly the problem. You've gotten so used to being in control, so comfortable with people laughing at your jokes and applauding your opinions, that you forgot what it's like to actually connect with another human being. You forgot that the person sitting across from you isn't just content for your show. They're a real person with real feelings. Colbert's expression shifted, something flickering across his face that might have been doubt, might have been realization, but it was quickly replaced by defensiveness. Don't try to psychoanalyze me, he snapped. You don't know anything about me. Phoenix nodded slowly. You're right, I don't, he agreed. But I know what I experienced tonight. I know how you made me feel. And I know I'm not going to stand here and pretend it's okay just because there are cameras watching. The host looked out at the audience then, as if suddenly remembering they were there. He forced a laugh, trying to lighten the mood. Well, folks, he said, his voice strained, I guess we found Joaquin Phoenix's breaking point. Who knew it would be a few harmless jokes? But the audience didn't laugh. They just sat there, silent, watching this disaster unfold with morbid fascination. Phoenix turned to the audience himself, making eye contact with the people in the front rows. I'm sorry you had to see this, he said sincerely. I didn't come here to cause a scene. I came here to talk about something I'm proud of, something I worked incredibly hard on. But I won't compromise my self-respect for anyone, not even for a good interview." Some people in the audience started clapping, hesitantly at first. Then more joined in, and soon there was a solid wave of applause supporting him. Colbert's face went purple. He couldn't believe what was happening. His own audience was clapping for the guest who was walking out on him. "Oh, that's rich," he said, his voice sharp and bitter. "That's just perfect. You turned my own audience against me. Real classy, Joaquin. Real professional." Phoenix didn't rise to the bait. He just looked at Colbert with something close to pity. "I didn't turn anyone against you," he said softly. "You did that yourself." The host took a step back, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "You want to leave? Leave. But don't expect to ever be invited back. Don't expect any other show to want you either once word gets out about this. You just made yourself radioactive, my friend." Phoenix raised his eyebrows slightly. "Is that a threat?" he asked calmly. "Because it sounds like a threat. And if you're threatening me right now, on camera, in front of all these witnesses, that really says everything anyone needs to know about who you actually are." Colbert seemed to realize he'd gone too far. His expression changed again, softening just slightly. "Look," he said, his voice lowering, "let's just take a breath here. We both got heated, said things we didn't mean. Why don't we sit back down, start fresh, forget this whole thing happened?" But Phoenix was already shaking his head before Colbert even finished speaking. "No," he said simply, "we can't forget it happened because it did happen. And I meant everything I said, every word." The silence that followed was deafening. Colbert stood there, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Phoenix waited, giving him the chance to say something, anything that might salvage this. But nothing came. Just awkward, horrible silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Finally, Phoenix nodded to himself, as if confirming a decision. "Okay then," he said quietly. "I'm going to leave now. I hope you figure out whatever it is that made you think treating people this way is acceptable." "Wait," Colbert said suddenly, his voice almost desperate. "Just wait 1 second. You can't actually be serious about this." Phoenix stopped, looked back one more time. "I've never been more serious about anything," he replied. Colbert's face went through another transformation, this time settling on something that looked almost like panic mixed with rage. His show was falling apart in real time, and he knew it. The control he usually had, the power dynamic that always favored the host, it was completely shattered now. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, his voice tight. "Walking out like this, burning this bridge, it's career suicide." Phoenix actually laughed at that, a genuine laugh that seemed to catch Colbert off guard. "Career suicide?" he repeated. "Are you hearing yourself right now? I'm walking away from one bad interview, not retiring from acting." But Colbert wasn't done. He seemed determined to have the last word, to regain some sense of control over the situation. "People are going to see this," he said, gesturing around at the cameras, the crew, the audience. "They're going to see you storm off my show like a child throwing a tantrum. How do you think that's going to look?" Phoenix's expression hardened again. "Let them see it," he said firmly. "Let them see exactly what happened here. Let them see how you treated me and how I responded. I'm not ashamed of standing up for myself." The host let out an exasperated sigh, running his hand through his hair. "This is insane," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "This is absolutely insane. You're throwing away a massive platform, tons of publicity for your movie, all because your feelings got hurt." Phoenix took a step closer, his voice dropping low but remaining perfectly audible. "My feelings didn't get hurt," he said clearly. "My boundaries got violated. There's a difference. And the fact that you can't see that difference is exactly why I'm leaving." Colbert's eyes flashed with anger again. "Boundaries?" he scoffed. "What boundaries? I asked you some questions, made some observations. That's what hosts do. That's the format of every single talk show that's ever existed. You sit down, I ask questions, we banter, you promote your movie, everyone goes home happy. But you had to make it into some kind of moral crusade." Phoenix shook his head, his patience clearly wearing thin. "You didn't just ask questions," he said, his voice rising slightly. "You attacked me. You belittled my work, compared it to meaningless play, then acted like I was the problem for not finding that funny." The audience was still dead silent. Every single person watching this unfold with rapt attention. Some had their phones out, clearly recording, which was only going to make this whole thing spread faster once it hit the internet. The producers had given up trying to intervene, seemingly resigned to letting this play out however it was going to play out. Colbert noticed the phones, noticed people recording, and his expression shifted to something almost desperate. Okay, he said, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. Maybe I came on a little strong. Maybe some of my jokes didn't land the way I intended. Can we just move past this? Can we sit down and have a real conversation now? But there was something hollow in his voice, something that suggested he was only saying this because he knew how bad this looked, not because he actually meant it. Phoenix could hear it too. You don't mean that, he said flatly. You're not sorry about what you said. You're sorry that I'm not playing along. That's not fair, Colbert protested, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm trying to fix this, trying to make it right. What more do you want from me? Phoenix looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him, and there was something sad in his eyes now. I wanted you to be better than this, he said quietly. I've watched your show before. I've seen you interview people with real curiosity, real interest. I know you're capable of more than what you showed me tonight. So, yeah, I guess I'm disappointed. The word disappointed seemed to hit Colbert harder than any of the anger had. His face flushed and his jaw clenched. You're disappointed in me? He said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, that's rich. The actor is disappointed in the talk show host. Should I be devastated? Should I cry about it? Phoenix didn't take the bait. You can react however you want, he said calmly, but I'm still leaving. He turned again, this time with more finality, and started walking toward the exit. No, Colbert said suddenly, his voice sharp and commanding. No, you don't get to just walk away. You don't get to come on my show, disrupt everything, make me look bad, and then just leave. Phoenix stopped but didn't turn around. Watch me, he said simply. The two words hung in the air like a challenge, like a line drawn in the sand. Colbert took a few quick steps forward, closing the distance between them. His voice was low now, almost threatening. You think you're the hero in this story, don't you? He said. You think walking out makes you brave, makes you principled, but all you're doing is proving that you can't handle the real world, that you need everyone to treat you like you're fragile. Phoenix turned around slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was ice cold. The real world? He repeated. You have no idea what the real world is like. You sit in your comfortable studio, surrounded by people who laugh at everything you say, who tell you you're brilliant, who never challenge you on anything. And then when someone does challenge you, when someone stands up to you, you call them fragile. That's not the real world. That's a bubble. And you've been in it so long you can't even see it anymore. Colbert's face twisted with rage. How dare you? He spat. How dare you come on my show and lecture me about bubbles? You're a movie star. You make millions of dollars. You live in mansions and fly private jets. Don't you dare act like you understand struggle or hardship or the real world any better than I do. Phoenix's expression didn't change. I never said I understand struggle better than you, he replied evenly. I said you live in a bubble where no one challenges you. Those are two different things. And the fact that you immediately got defensive and started attacking me personally kind of proves my point. The host opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, then opened it again. His face was red, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. This whole thing was spiraling so far out of control that there was no way to salvage it, no way to end it cleanly. Everyone in that studio knew it, could feel it, but neither man seemed willing or able to back down. You know what your problem is? Colbert finally said, his voice shaking slightly. You can't separate yourself from your characters. You've played so many damaged, troubled people that you've started to become them. You're not actually this tortured soul. You're just an actor who's forgotten how to be normal. Phoenix stared at him, and for a moment, it looked like he might actually respond with anger, might raise his voice or say something harsh. But instead, he just smiled that same cold smile from earlier. And there it is, he said softly. The amateur psychology, the personal attack. You've run out of actual arguments, so now you're just trying to hurt me. Colbert's expression flickered with something that might have been shame, but it was quickly buried under more defensiveness. I'm not trying to hurt you, he said. I'm trying to make you see how ridiculous you're being. Phoenix shook his head slowly. I'm not being ridiculous, he said. I'm being honest. Maybe that's uncomfortable for you. Maybe it's not what you're used to, but it's not ridiculous. Colbert laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Honest? He said. You want to talk about honesty? Let's be honest then. You came on this show because your publicist told you to. You don't actually want to be here. You don't like doing press. You don't like talking to hosts like me. You think it's all beneath you. But you do it anyway because that's what sells tickets. So don't act like you're on some moral high ground here. You're just as much a part of this machine as I am." There was a long pause. Phoenix looked at Colbert, really looked at him, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter, but somehow more powerful. "You're right," he said, and Colbert's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "I don't love doing press. It's not my favorite part of the job. But I do it because I believe in the work, and I want people to see it. And when I agree to come on a show, I show up with good intentions. I try to be open, try to be present, try to give the host and the audience something real. That's the deal. That's the social contract. But you broke that contract tonight. You didn't treat me like a guest or even like a human being. You treated me like target practice." Colbert's jaw worked silently for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter too, but still defensive. "I was just doing my job," he said. Phoenix nodded slowly. "Then maybe you need to rethink what your job actually is," he replied. "Because if your job is making guests feel small so you can feel big, then I want no part of it." The host's face flushed again, but this time he didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Finally, Colbert spoke, and his voice was tired now, drained of the earlier aggression. "So that's it then," he said. "You're really leaving?" It wasn't quite a question, more of a statement of resignation. Phoenix nodded once. "That's it," he confirmed. "I wish it had gone differently. I really do. But I can't stay here and pretend everything is fine when it's not." Colbert looked down at the floor, then back up at Phoenix. "And there's nothing I can say to change your mind?" he asked. But again, it didn't really sound like a question. Phoenix considered for a moment, then shook his head. "No," he said simply. "There's nothing. This needed to happen. Maybe not like this, maybe not this publicly, but it needed to happen. Because what you did tonight, the way you spoke to me, it's not okay. And if I had stayed and finished the interview, I would have been saying it was okay. I would have been giving you permission to treat the next guest the same way, and I'm not willing to do that." Colbert's shoulders sagged slightly, the fight seeming to drain out of him. "Fine," he said, his voice flat. "Go. Do whatever you need to do." Phoenix gave him one last look, something complicated in his expression, mixture of disappointment, sadness, maybe even a little pity. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. This time, Colbert didn't call after him, didn't try to stop him. He just stood there, watching Phoenix leave, his face unreadable. The audience sat frozen, unsure if they should clap or stay silent. Most chose silence. The only sound was Phoenix's footsteps as he walked off the stage, past the cameras, past the crew members who stepped aside to let him through, and finally disappeared through the exit door. The moment the door closed behind him, Colbert seemed to snap back to himself. He turned to face the audience. That practiced smile trying desperately to return to his face but not quite making it. "Well," he said, his voice strained and artificial, "that was something." The audience gave a weak, uncomfortable laugh. Colbert walked back to his desk, sat down heavily in his chair, and looked directly into the camera. "We're going to take a quick break," he said, "and when we come back, we'll have our musical guest." His smile was frozen, his eyes hard, and everyone watching knew that nothing was going to be the same after this.